What's up, guys? Welcome to the second installment of the Fire Your Coach series. We are getting into the nitty-gritty of programming. We're starting with base principles. We're going to build off those linearly until we have this kind of entire theory of programming, or at least we have a sufficient understanding of all the pieces so that we can put together something comprehensive, and that when we have to make changes, we're not just throwing darts at the wall to see what sticks. We're actually making really good educated guesses, and we have tools so that we can pivot as needed to solve problems. That's what this is all about. So step one, we covered SRN. I thought that was a good place to start because that's how I conceptualize every decision I ever make. It's through the lens of what am I going to change next in order to get a desired result? And you're always going to do something to either raise or lower the stress, to address recovery, or to incorporate some form of novelty. And whether you're talking about a linear progression, the most basic foundational type of program you can run, or a very complicated like block periodization split, that is going to be the thing that determines what you do workout to workout and block to block. So now that we got that down, I want to cover a conceptual idea about what happens when we work out to begin with. And this is going to cover the very first thing we do with regards to progressions, because we're going to cover what I think is the most important thing about a program. It's not what you do today. It's not about the best exercises, the best split, the best set and rep range. Do you train to failure or not? Those are all relevant, but they're not the most important thing. The reason so many different things work is because whoever's running them has a handle on how to progress them over time. And there's going to be a different approach to that depending on all of the different things you might run. So to understand how we move from one workout to the next, how we stack progress by making deliberate changes, workout to workout to workout, that's the most important thing. To know that, we have to know this. So the basic idea is we have this baseline, homeostasis. We don't know what that means. That's just how we are in our natural environment, undisturbed. If you're just a couch potato, you don't do shit all day, you just shove Pringles into your face and just hit the clicker, and that's your life, your body still has a basic amount of muscle. It maintains a basic ability to do certain day-to-day things. We don't just completely dissolve into a puddle of goop. We actually still maintain some form. So you can call that homeostasis. Now, the cool thing is that your body adapts to outside stress so that you might not necessarily have to look like a sedentary pile of shit your entire life. You can actually get these adaptations to change the way you look, the way you function, and you actually retain some of it, which is kind of cool. Not all of it. I remember the first time I realized that years of training went by the wayside when I took a few months to just kind of dick around and run and not really take my workout seriously. I was mortified. I thought every bit of gains was like a piece of gold. And then, taking a couple months to run and not really focus on my diet, it was like I just lost my life savings. I was completely traumatized by that. But the cool thing is that you're never going to fall back quite as low as where you were when you started. I've had to take a lot of time off from injury. I had a complete leg break where I couldn't do any load bearing. I could bench, but I couldn't do any load bearing on my leg for a couple of months. And in all that time, it took me maybe a month to come back before I was using kind of normal working weights. It's not like I had to retrace those 12 years of training. So your point of homeostasis, this point does increase as time goes on. But if we consider ourselves the couch potato that is not used to any stress whatsoever, if we decide to get off the couch and let's say do a set of push-ups, that represents a stress. It's going to take us out of our comfort zone. So conceptually, our body had to work, it had to exhaust energy, it had to be exposed to tension, and that put a strain on our system as a whole. And because of that, we lose resources because that damage is done that has to be repaired. Our body is in this stress state. So we temporarily drop below this plane of homeostasis and our body has to repair itself. We have to go through a recovery phase before we even get back to normal. So you can think of that short term as the soreness you feel, the inflammation that occurs, the immediate loss of energy, of fuel, the immediate exhaustion you feel, and the effects that last maybe a day, 2 days, where you're not quite as strong and everything just fucking hurts. And then after that, you get an adaptation. Beyond that point of recovery, you actually end up better than where you ended up. And this can actually occur for a little while after you fully recover. There's kind of a delay that goes on, and that's important with more advanced programming later on. Now, this is not a perfect model. I'm going to get comments about how accurate this is, and I don't care. There's a point of nerding out where it doesn't matter. It's not helpful because in some sense, some of the adaptations are actually immediate. Things like neurological adaptations can happen very, very quick, where other adaptations do actually take longer. So it's not like one clear thing. There's a bunch of different processes going on. But conceptually, this is pretty much what we observe when we go through workouts day to day, and making sure that we're stacking those workouts appropriately. So if you're not going through this cycle like every couple of hours because you would exhaust yourself. You're not going through it like once every 2 weeks because you would just detrain. If you do nothing, you just come right back to homeostasis. The real goal is to build off this, stack it together over time. And if you can do that successfully, take each cycle and stack one after another, that's how you get really substantial long-term growth. So that's really cool. Now, another thing that I don't want to get caught up in is this word right here, because I know there's going to be people commenting on, oh, it's not a stress, bro, it's a stimulus. It's not a stress, it's stimulus. Renaissance Periodization, Mike Israetel, they put out a ton of good work. I really like their ways of thinking about things. Their approaches are all very valid. And they talk a lot about stimulus. They have the fatigue to stimulus ratio that they talk about, where you are weighing out the cost of doing a particular activity, the cost of doing a stimulus that might cause growth versus how much fatigue it costs or how much it might set you back. So if you have something that causes about as much growth as something else, but it has this huge cost associated with it, people talk about, let's say, deadlifts for growing your hamstrings versus a hamstring curl. One might be a lot better for targeting the hamstrings, and it might not have the huge cost that deadlifts have. So in a particular setting, if you have to do a lot of exercises, or if your training is very exhausting, maybe if you want to grow your hamstrings, you don't do that thing over here. So that's a very valid way of thinking about training. Is very useful conceptually. And people differentiate between a stressor, which is something that just causes a stress. It just places some stress on your body. It's not necessarily something that causes the stimulus for growth that you want. So people can get caught up in those terms. A stimulus for growth is generally a stressor, but a stressor like running 10 miles is a stressor. That's not going to do anything to jack your deadlift up. So differentiating between those is somewhat important, but we're going to assume that things you do in the gym are related to growth and that you're not just going and running into a wall over and over and over and saying, gee, that was stressful, I must be doing things right. So stressor, anything with a cost, stimulus is the thing that's actually focused towards the growth that we want. So assuming we're doing that, this is what we can expect to see. Now, if we transition into boom. Are you looking for access to exclusive programs from the best minds in the field and some of your favorite YouTube influencers? Then look no further than Boostcamp. Boostcamp is a long-term sponsor of this channel, and I wouldn't be partnered with them if they didn't provide a great product. If you want optimal performance, you cannot just wing your weight selection. You have to make deliberate steps forward. So you need a program and you need a way to track progress on it. They make it easy to track your workouts from the convenience of your phone, so you never have to rely on your sloppy handwriting or your bad memory. And they give you access to a library of exclusive programs from some of the most well-known names in the business. Eric Helms, Bryce Lewis, Jeff Schofield, Bald Omni-Man, and yours truly. We all have programs up there that can only be found on the app, and it is absolutely free. My programs, Bullmastiff and 70s Powerlifter, are both up there. And you can also check out Full Sturker, which tells you how to get strongman jacked using the things you find in a corporate gym. So special thank you to Boostcamp for making this channel possible. Unburden yourself from the hard business of making the perfect program from scratch. We've got them pre-made for you. Download their app right now by clicking the link in the description. Step 0. Because the next series of videos is going to talk specifically about progressions. I'm going to lay out my favorite progressions, all the different ways you would progress, why you might do one over another, and those are going to be relevant as entire programs by themselves or as pieces of something more elaborate, like what you might do in an individual block as part of a bigger periodization program for an athlete. So step 0 is no progression. Like I said, let's say you're the sedentary fat shit, you haven't done anything and you're looking to figure out how to be less of a fat shit. I say that as a former fat shit. You guys can take it as an insult. I identify as a fat shit. So I'm speaking to all of you guys. The first thing you do off the couch when you don't even know how to lift a weight might be a set of push-ups. You might roll on the ground and do a set of, that's bugging me, do a set of sit-ups. Now you might not have a progression. You might just resolve, I'm gonna do 20 push-ups every day. That is perfectly fine. In fact, that's great. What that represents is a stress, but not necessarily a progression because you're not building off of it. Well, let's think of what happens when you do that for several weeks. You just do the same thing every day. Or it might be starting a labor job. If you went from being an office worker to a construction worker, essentially the same type of work every day, but it's not progressing on itself. Well, what's going to happen when you do nothing, not a zilch? you hit your first stressor, your first day on the job, or the first workout where you do that little circuit, and you're going to do a 30-day challenge where you do it every day. The first workout, that stress period is going to hit fucking hard. And the reason is because you have no tolerance to it. So the gap between what you need to be able to stand that type of stress versus where you're at is going to be at its absolute biggest. So it's going to take a long time to recover. You're going to say, fuck me, I'm really sore. You're not even going to be able to conceptualize adding weight or doing more than you already did. Now, it might actually take a while before you get back to normal. And then as you recover and adapt, you're going to figure out that, wow, I can do like 20% more work now and I feel fine. The improvements are going to be huge. Welcome to newbie gains. It's a benefit of being extremely deconditioned and out of shape. Your body's going to pick up fast. Well, assuming you don't change anything, you just do the exact same thing you did before, you're going to find you're better suited towards it. You handle it much better. It's not going to have this big psychological burden. And your technique's probably going to be a bit better because now you're more practiced. You kind of know how to pace yourself. You know how to position yourself. You're getting awareness for how your body moves. And that applies again to labor, to like picking shit up and moving more efficiently. So you're still going to have a big hit, but now it's going to be a little bit diminished. Now, an important takeaway from this, two things. One, diminish returns. That's this curve. You do the same thing, it still provides a response. It still provides an effect. It's just not as great. But also, what most people believe, especially as they've been training longer, that a workout almost doesn't count unless it's harder than last time. Now, that's not necessarily a bad strategy. We want to progress, and we're going to get to that. But you can do the same thing. And if it was good enough to give you an effect the first day, it's going to be good enough to give you an effect in some capacity in subsequent days, and that has a very good use case. So before we even get to the idea of something like a linear progression, let's think of when you would actually want to incorporate a style of training that doesn't build off of itself. When you want to do something that's just static and unmoving, it's just an amount of work you do every day. Well, I can think of things that go on the back burner right off the top of my head. I mean, things that you're not really focused on, like, okay, it's not training related, but I run a couple miles every day. I'm not trying to chase a marathon time. I'm not trying to chase a 5-minute mile. God help me. But I am maintaining that. And what happens is steadily over time, I do get a little bit better as time goes on without having to think about it. So that works against the excuse of, well, I don't have this perfect program, so I might as well not do anything. Maintaining a certain amount of work is so fucking useful to getting good over a long period of time. So that's one, to just do things you don't have to think about. You don't have to worry about the math or whatever. Another one, maintenance. If you've been training for a long time and you just have to take some time off, maybe life is stressful, you have a newborn, you change jobs, just doing a basic amount of work, I'm committing to this and I'm not going to worry about anything else. I'm not chasing PRs. I don't need optimal sleep or food. I just got to maintain. And what you will expect if you do that is not only will you not lose strength or size because maintenance is super easy, but you might actually be a little bit better. So that's very liberating. Technical work is another big one. If you're brand new, having no progression, just doing the exact same thing will allow you to focus on moving crisply, efficiently, which is huge. You have advanced lifters where being extremely efficient is a difference between peak performance and not really performing very well at all. And then you have completely unadvanced new novice lifters where that's a big deal because their technique is representing this big gap in potential performance ability because they are so disconnected from the actual movement. So that's really important right there. So if you have a newbie who's lifting, don't think about harder. Progression eventually will be part of it. But if you have huge flaws in the way you squat, if you have huge flaws in your ability to move, there's no problem with staying the same because you will still benefit even though you're not actually progressing load. Blocks focused on other things. You're going to have blocks of training and periodization where you don't necessarily need to hit the gas. Step progressions is another one. That would be an intermittent period where you're essentially doing the same thing, or at least you're keeping the weight the same. So that's another powerful tool. While you're focusing on other things, you can hang out for a couple of weeks before you decide to commit to a jump. And all of these are very, very effective ways to grow, to make sure you have mastery over something before you move up. So that's a very powerful tool. Also, when you look at more advanced guys, you might think that if guys aren't hitting the gas all the time, they're not doing anything. Look at someone like Mike Tuchscherer, he coined RPE. in his emergent training strategies, he actually discovers the appropriate block length for each individual, because it varies quite a bit from individual to individual. So instead of just guessing, he has them do the same thing every week. Now, granted, it's RPE, so assuming you get stronger from week 1 to week 2, then if the RPE is the same, the weight still goes up a little bit, but he's not making drastic changes. He's not aggressively forcing them into a progression, and he has them do the same sets, the same effort prescription, the same exercises multiple weeks in a row until he sees them drop off. And he's like, okay, that's your block length. Might be 3 weeks, might be 6 or 7 weeks, and he can find it that way. So there's a lot of utility in a zero progression approach. It also explains what happens when people are brand new and they go to the gym for the first time, they're dicking around and they don't really know what they're doing. They're still gonna see an immense amount of growth because any stress kicks them out of homeostasis. I mean, when you're brand new, your homeostasis is so artificially low. We're meant to be active and out in the world. So if you compare like a laborer or construction worker compared to an average person, there's a huge gap there. So it's so easy to pop up in the beginning, but not having to necessarily worry about progression gives you so many tools to focus on technique, get comfortable with the effort, wrap your head around what completing a workout is like without feeling like you need to grow. And even as you get more advanced, I can speak from experience, getting bumps and bruises and injuries, even as you get more advanced, you don't necessarily need to have every moment of your life, every training moment of your life be focused on progression. So there's utility. So starting out with this, we can kind of get rid of the idea that harder, and just beating yourself to the ground is essential. It is in some respect, but as we talk about other progressions, we'll address that. But we'll have a very, very powerful tool knowing that there is another component, that recovery can be a factor, that it doesn't have to be just up without end. And that's going to help us solve a lot of problems, because one of the big pitfalls that people fall into is they don't know how to keep hitting the gas. Once the diminished returns went here, once you hit this wall, people don't know what to do because all they know is more. So taking time to back off, taking time to have kind of a flat progression, to focus on other things, technique, and so on, or maintenance. You maintain one thing while you put all your eggs in another basket. All of these are tools that are going to make more sense as we go down the road. And then when you're a newbie and you do finally incorporate effort, novelty, when you add in progression, when you have structure to the way that you improve on the workouts, it's just explosive growth. And when this rocket hits its wall and diminished returns set in again, because they always come for you, then you will still know how to regroup, reorganize things, and reposition yourself to relive this cycle all over again. And that is how you do something long term. So hopefully this gave you guys some things to think about. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Leave questions and comments in the comment section, and I'll see you on the next one.